All right, 1 second here. All right, welcome on to this Q&A. Again, want to welcome on to this Q&A. So a couple questions came in. See how far we go. One question, general question, and that is, how do we define a talmid hacham? What is a talmid hacham? Usually translated as a rabbinic scholar. Literally, it means it's a student of a wise person, but again, we would normally translate that as a rabbinic scholar. So the question comes: how do you define somebody that is somebody that's Talmud Chacham? So then the Gemara brings down. There are other sources bring down that someone who's considered a rabbinic scholar. I think people would be kind of shocked at this, and that is one criteria is it's obvious by knowledge, right? It's obvious how much they know. That is a major criteria. I mean, a person can be, can have a lot of knowledge, can also be, have bad character traits and other things. So that also isn't good. But it's brought down that one aspect of being a rabbinic scholar is that they know all 24 books of Tanakh, right? Which is kind of, a little bit surprising. You tell me, they know the entire Talmud, they know all the commentators, they know, you know, um, early commentators, later commentators. Again, there are different levels, different levels of rabbinic scholars. Here, though, brought down, they should know all 24 books of Tanakh. That means they should know them well. So today, how many people, can we say, even though let's say they know a lot of Talmud and they know other things, how many are going to be so well versed, in Tanakh? It's probably not as common, right? Probably not as common. It's an interesting thing, though, that, it is brought down. That's how you would define a rabbinic scholar. So today, how many, according to that, how many rabbinic scholars you're going to find that, know all of Tanakh, like the back of their hand, right? So I'm sure they know, Tanakh somewhat, but to say they know it like the back of their hand and different things, well, it's probably a harder thing to find. And normally you find people that, they have specific knowledge, right? In other words, they become expert in something. There are people that, their expertise, let's say is in Eruvin, right? To make an Eruv, which is very complex. Some have the, expertise in the laws, let's say of kashrus, or the laws of Shabbos, or both, or let's say you have rabbinic court judges, right? They have mastered the laws of damages, right? They also rabbinical courts deal with marriage, divorce, some other things as well, but mostly the laws, of damages, right? In general, so someone who's mastered those laws, right? We've spoken about what makes someone a rabbi. We'll sort of rehash this a little bit. Somebody, let's say they're a rabbinic court judge. Could you ask them a question on the laws of Shabbos? Now, Shabbos probably not their area of expertise, right? Nonetheless, it's brought down also someone who doesn't have, let's say, rabbinic ordination in something, they shouldn't answer questions on it. Yeah, in general. In general. So someone, let's say, got rabbinic ordination. Some people get rabbinic ordination, the laws of Shabbos. Some get, plus that, the laws of mixing milk and meat, i.e. the laws of kashrus. Others, the laws of family purity laws, right? Or availance of people that have to mourn, right? Let's say. Or some get all of these, some get some of these, right? But it is brought down, interesting, it is brought down, if you pass the test, let's say, in the laws of Shabbos, right? That doesn't necessarily mean that person's qualified to answer questions on the laws, the laws of kashrus, right? Or the laws of family purity laws, right? These laws are very different, right? Now, what if a person, let's say, didn't take the requisite test, but they do have the knowledge? Yeah, they do have the knowledge. So you have people like that, but as we always say, I think rabbinic ordination is overrated. But I think the reason it's overrated because just because you passed the test, okay, that doesn't necessarily mean, a person has the ability, to answer every last, question about it. Okay, they went through the material, very good. Right? They passed the test, very good. But what's the main criteria? The main criteria is who they learn under, and when they go to them for questions. That's another main criteria. Also, someone who's a rabbinic scholar, let's say, the Gemara in Chagiga says, if you want to learn under a rabbi, that rabbi has to be in your eyes like an angel. Now, it doesn't mean they're perfect. Nobody in this world is perfect except for God, right? Moshe Rabbeinu wasn't perfect. Certain level of knowledge he didn't have, right? Not a knock against Moshe Rabbeinu, God forbid, but there was knowledge, there was certain knowledge that he didn't have, right? But knowledge is not everything, right? And my Rabbi said this many times, when they appoint, rabbinic court judges, which again, they spend years, learning all these laws. They're very complex, very, very complex. I once saw a program that you had to dedicate 10 years. 10 years just to learning this, so there's a lot to learn, right? There's a lot to learn. And it wasn't something I was necessarily willing to do because that's the only thing you're focusing on. Again, you have an end goal, right? The end goal is, a person, would sit on a rabbinical court, let's say, or, answer questions on that, because they've gone through the grind. It's a tremendous amount of information, unbelievable amount of information. Yeah. So I was willing to dedicate myself for 10 years to do that. But as my Rabbi said many times, getting, having that rabbinic ordination, i.e., you passed the test, very good, right? But the people appointing obviously should be rabbinic scholars, right? I mean, much greater rabbinic scholars like Torah giants, right? Should appoint these people. That's one thing, right? But the second thing, even more important, is, do they have shimush, right? Shimush means they did like a stage, as they would say here. It's like an apprenticeship, right? You learned by a rabbi, let's say. You saw how they answered questions and, you went through the material. So like, the material, but you're getting practical experience, right? Practical experience could be, in the laws of, let's say, family purity laws, right? So whatever, a lot of these laws are complex. So, a person has to learn by somebody. All these things you have to learn by somebody. By having the knowledge, as my Rabbi would say, and others are not going to disagree, right? The most important thing is not just the knowledge itself, right? You need proper character traits, right? So in order to be pointed, someone else obviously should recommend the person. And it's not about just book knowledge, because technically anybody can get book knowledge, right? You learn enough, you learn from the right people, whatever, you can get certain level of book knowledge. That doesn't mean a person has proper character traits, right? One of my rabbis told me, or said that he learned under somebody didn't even last a couple of weeks. This person was an absolute rabbinic genius, right? Absolute rabbinic genius. He said, but the person's character traits were so bad. He didn't tell me what they were, but he didn't tell me who the person was either. But he said the character traits were so bad. Yeah, he said he couldn't learn by him. Right? So a person will ask, well, does the person have requisite knowledge? Yes. Person has requisite knowledge. Okay. Right? But there is a statement that says, derech eretz kidmu l'Torah. Right? Derech eretz, proper character traits, comes before Torah. So what difference does it make all the Torah you're learning if it doesn't make you into a mensch? If it doesn't give you proper character traits? Doesn't mean, again, the person's walking on water and people are going to think, oh, they never make mistakes. Like they're not human. Not true. Everyone's human. Everyone can make mistakes. Everyone can get angry. Yeah, say, oh, but you expect bigger things from greater people. True. But having the knowledge alone is not enough. Right? Having knowledge is not enough. Right? The most important thing, yeah, you'll tell me, is getting the knowledge, but that's not the most important thing. I don't think it's the most important thing. The most important thing is, did you see other great people in action in the same thing that you were learning? Yeah? In other words, did you learn from others? That's a huge thing. That's more important than anything else. In other words, you did what they call here a stage. You had like an apprenticeship. You sat with them. You saw they answered questions. You got practical experience. That's what we'll say. Right? But you learned under someone else, right? Someone starting out as an electrician, let's say. We use an electrician example. No, they pass all the exams. They know what they're doing, let's say, but they're not going to go out on their own. Nobody's going to know who they are, this, that. So they'll do it with someone else. They'll join with someone else until either they stay that way and they just work together, right? Or eventually they decide to go on their own, right? A lawyer, someone, let's say, passes the bar exam, they're not setting up their own law, the law firm. Most likely they're going to learn, they're going to work for others. Eventually, maybe they'll work their way up or they'll go out on their own eventually. Doctors, same thing, right? All these things. A person's going to work with others, right? You got to work with others, decide to go on your own or not. Okay, it's a different issue, right? But in this case, you got to learn by others. Just having the knowledge is not enough. It's what we call shimush talmidei chachamim, right? It's called working with others, right? Right? That's what it means, right? That's what it means. So therefore, that's the most important thing. Right? And I'll tell you further. Even people will poo-poo this and whatever, right? But I'll tell you, let's say you have a Torah giant of the generation. Everyone agrees. A Torah giant, of a generation. And they wrote a book, right? And someone helped them with it, right? Let's say. They helped them with it. Whether they help financially, they help to edit it, right? Or whatever. Yeah? So this, let's say, great rabbi of the generation. This great rabbi of the generation, what does he do? So in the introduction, talks about, the great praise he has, the God for helping him write this book, whatever. And usually in an introduction, someone wrote a book, what do they do? They write, about people that help them, right? They write about people that help them. Some help with the manuscript, some help with this, some help financially, whatever it is. Now, let's say that Torah giant, right? Let's say they say, I want to thank, the great, wonderful rabbi so-and-so helped me with this book. Now, a person can say, you can look at this one of two ways. You can say, well, it's flattery. Does he really think you're a rabbi? He's calling you rabbi? Well, you don't throw around terms for nothing. Yeah, that's one thing. People are going to say, oh, but it doesn't mean that, right? It doesn't mean that person, can answer questions. Okay, so let's analyze the statement for a second. A Torah giant says, this is a prolific rabbi that helped me. right? Let's say that's what it says. Now, that means you're getting an approbation in this book. Doesn't matter what you helped for. Yeah, without editing it, you gave some money, whatever. This Torah giant, whoever the Torah giant is, yeah, we're talking about a legitimate Torah giant here, right? We're not making anything up here. A bona fide Torah giant going to everybody, right? No one's going to disagree. They may not agree with everything they say. It doesn't matter. Nobody's going to disagree. Now, if that rabbi, right, who's well known, right, throughout the Torah world, puts a line in the introduction of this book, and he says, I want to thank Rabbi, this great Rabbi so-and-so for helping me. They're going to say, but he didn't give him rabbinic ordination. But let's say he didn't. Okay. Let's say he doesn't have rabbinic ordination. So what? Okay. This Torah giant of the generation, whoever they may be, is giving an approbation and thanking the person for helping them. They could have just said Mr. So-and-so. They could have, I want to thank, I don't know, Daniel Schwartz for helping me for this book. You didn't have to call him Rabbi. So we didn't have to call him Rabbi. They don't throw around terms like that for nothing. Yeah? So if this person says, if this great rabbi says, this person himself, the great prolific rabbi, what does that say? It doesn't say he's got rabbinic ordination. True. Right? That's very true. But what does it say? It says that this rabbi vouches for the person. That says this person has integrity. That this person is something in the world. That's what it means. Yeah? That's what it means. Oh, you tell me, he didn't say you have rabbinic ordination. Didn't have to. Yeah? If a great rabbi says that, that's worth gold. Because he just gave it approbation. Or better, he thanked you, whatever. But he gave you an accolade. Right? An accolade, sorry. Gave an accolade over here. Right? Everyone knows who my Rabbi is, made very clear. So I once asked him for a letter, right, of approbation for what I do. I have a letter, actually, about fitting to give classes in public. That I have a letter somewhere, right? But he said I could never write a letter for you. So why not? He said, because, what I do is a little bit strange. I work with non-Jews, and non-Jews either want to convert or don't want to convert. So he said, everyone, in the rabbinical court where I am, they all laugh. He said, what, you're writing a letter of approbation for someone who works with non-Jews? Like, a little bit strange. So he told me, again, I'm not tooting my own horn here, I'm just pointing this out, right? So he said, I won't write a letter for you. I will not write a letter for you. He said, but if someone comes to me, and I hope this is still true, if someone comes to me, he says, they ask me, can I be relied on for classes? Yes. He says, I will say I will vouch for you. That's what he told me. So I said, I want a letter. I was like, never do this, right? But I said, I want a letter. He said, I'm not giving you a letter. He said, I can't give you a letter. He said, but if I recommend you to other people, is that good enough for you? I said, no, I want a letter. He goes, that's as good as it's going to get. I said, but you won't recommend me? You won't throw me under the bus? He said, no, I'll recommend you. I said, okay. Yeah. It doesn't mean he gave me rabbinic ordination. Yeah. That's not what it means. That's as good as it gets. Yeah. He is the Torah giant of the generation. Next 2 weeks is going to be 100. It's going to hit 100. Should be well. Yeah. So every once in a while, I was like, can I still get a letter? He's just like, no, move on. Yeah. So not to do my own horn, but what does that say? That says you can rely on me. I guess. Does that mean I'm perfect? No. Does that mean I'm going to make every right decision? No. You get a pat in the back by somebody like that, doesn't mean you can do anything. Certainly not. Right? And he'll certainly put me in a place if I have to, and he has done that. Right? But at the same time, at the same time, you say, but he didn't write you a letter. Very good. He didn't write me a letter. He still won't write me a letter. right? And even if you wrote it, you need like 10 people to decipher it the way he writes, but it doesn't matter, right? But someone would call him and he'd say, oh, yeah, he's fine. You can rely on him. That's worth something. Yeah, does that mean I can answer every last question on anything? No, doesn't mean that, per se. I think people get carried away. Even people who have rabbinic ordination think they're God's gift to the world. They can answer this, that, and the other thing when you know, they're not what we call a bar hacham. They're not someone to be able to do that. But ego gets in the way, right? So, the first thing is a person has to have knowledge. They absolutely have to have knowledge, right? Now, there are different levels of knowledge, right? Many different levels of knowledge. A person's gone through, let's say, a good part of the Talmud. That's serious knowledge, right? They've gone through a lot of, Shulchan Aruch, code of Jewish law. That's serious knowledge. And again, when they took an exam on it, not taking an exam on it, that doesn't take away from the fact that they have knowledge, right? And they have still, there are people. That's how you determine. Fortunately or unfortunately, that's how you determine, who's big, who's not big in the Jewish world, in the Orthodox world, by knowledge, by what they know. There are people, you ask them anything, let's say about kashrus, they can answer. Yeah, they know it backwards and forwards. Yeah, you got people that know about marriage and divorce. Very good. You have people that are expert in Arabs. Very good. In Shabbos and other things. Yeah. There are people that are super focused, which is not a bad thing, per se. Super focused that they're expert. They have a certain expertise. Certain expertise. Yeah. But that does not necessarily make them experts in other things. Someone who has an expertise, let's say in air, very good. So I would assume there are a lot of things the laws of Shabbos they have to know as well. Now, does that mean you could ask them anywhere about the laws of Shabbos? No. But they should have a certain level of knowledge. Right? But it also is brought down, as we said before, if a person has certain, expertise in one thing, doesn't mean necessarily they should answer in other things. Now, if it's something obvious, then they could answer. If it's something a lot more complex, and they have to take time to look it up and this and that, right? If it's a lot more complex, then they have to get advice from someone else. Shouldn't answer the question on their own. If it's something you look up, it's easy. Forget about looking online or ChatGPT or all that. Right? If it's something obvious you look up, yeah, that's the answer. Very good. If something more complex, a good question. It's a very good question. Should you answer it or not? But so what's crucial? What's crucial is they have the knowledge, right? That's for sure. Second thing I would say, they have shimush talmidei chachamim. They've spoken to other, rabbinic scholars, and they take advice from them, right? As well, throughout the years, they have people they can go to ask, whatever question. And third, I don't know if I necessarily would put it third. Maybe I would put it at the top. Before you have knowledge, is you got to be a match. You have to have proper character traits. Right? So the question would be, what does that mean? That means exactly what it says. Right? It doesn't mean a person's perfect. Right? Now, a person may say, oh, I came across this rabbi, spoke to him, and the person was like, shredded me. Wasn't so nice, wasn't this. Okay, so maybe they're questioning why they did it that way. There are some people, big rabbinic scholars, and they have no bedside manner. Yeah. Does that take away from the fact they're a rabbinic scholar or not? Seemingly it does, to a certain extent. Doesn't take away their knowledge, right? But it depends, right? Sometimes, a person can be gruff. A person can, not be so friendly, not be so open. It depends. Now, again, character traits are important. Now, a person has really bad character traits, then it doesn't matter what the knowledge they have. Right? And that's really the point, because if we say, and we do, derech eretz kidum l'Torah, if we say derech eretz comes first, yeah, if we say derech eretz kidum l'Torah, then if they don't have it, right? If they don't have it, so that's a problem, right? That's a serious issue. So you need, right? Um, you need proper knowledge. You need to learn by others as well, right? Get advice from others. And the third thing is you need proper character traits, right? Now, there are different levels of rabbinic scholars, as well. You can have people that know the entire talmid backwards, forward, sideways, and they know halacha backwards, forward, sideways, right? You can have people that, not as well versed in Jewish law, but more versed in, let's say, in the Talmud or whatever. So there are different levels, right? There are many different levels, over here. But you have to be a mensch, you have to have proper character traits. Yeah. Knowledge without proper character traits is not worth very much. Not really worth anything. Again, it doesn't mean people can't make mistakes, right? We're not saying that they're angels and they're perfect. Now, there happen to be a lot of, rabbinic scholars that are, right? That, have impeccable character traits, etc. But again, it doesn't mean they're not infallible. Doesn't mean that, right, per se. But the character traits are important. I think, character traits is very important, as well as who they learned by and who they continue to ask advice from. Because this, if a person thinks, they can do everything on their own, or, I know if someone's got a resume very long, very impressive. One thing glaring that's missing, and that is who they go to ask questions to. Now that's a problem. Because if it's not there, who their rabbinic scholar is, that's a major red flag. Yeah, that's a major red flag. And called someone out a number of years ago. So I was giving, classes to Noahides and whatever, was doing a terrible job, let's just say. Right? I gave him a golden opportunity, because everyone knows who my rabbinic scholar is, who I go to. I gave him a golden opportunity, say who backs you. Right? And someone is saying controversial things. You need someone with a very big backbone. You need a Torah giant to back them. You can't just say it on your own, right? Especially if it's contradictory to a lot of different things. Give him a golden opportunity. I don't have to answer to you. Throw me under the bus, Rabbi Singer under the bus, Rabbi Skolback under the bus. But give him a golden opportunity. Golden opportunity. Yeah. So then someone said, I'm going to be a rabbi who got the access and that. I said, that's a good question. So first of all, I don't believe he's got rabbinic ordination, but even if he did, that's beyond. That's well beyond. In other words, if you're not going to answer, why are you not answering? To millions of people, go answer. Go answer who backs you. Right? Give a person a golden opportunity. Because I know nobody backs them. Yeah? Or I would have grilled the person that supposedly does. Yeah? But anyway, it didn't come to fruition. Right? I called the bluff. I have to call the bluff because the person was causing damage. That's what some people don't understand. Oh, rabbis say it depends for what? Someone is spreading heresy, this and that. You have to come out against it. It's not lashon hara. It's an obligation. You absolutely have an obligation to call them out because they're misleading other people. So you can't have that. You have to know the facts. Facts have to be clear. You heard it firsthand. There are a lot of factors involved, but you have to warn people. When I say every second of every day you have to do it, not necessarily, but it has to be done. Right? It certainly has to be done. There's no question. Yeah, because they're misleading people. It's lashon hara. It's not lashon hara. You're saving people. You're saving people. Listen to this drivel and garbage that they're spreading that goes against Torah. Right? And there are people that you have to say that. Because if you don't say that, then people are going to get the wrong impression. Right? So that's the answer to that. somebody else will deal with this. I get explained. Simple practical example: how do you take trumah and maaser? Take tithes on Israeli produce purchased in Egypt, right? Let's say bought kilogram of dates from Israel. Now, this is a problem. This is a major problem, right? And the reason it's a major problem is because, according to Chief Rabbinate, they should not be selling produce that is going outside of Israel, right? You have to tithe it, right? We'll see what that means. They're not allowed to sell it, or right, to sell it to Europe, to America, whatever, before they've taken trumah maaser, before they've taken tithes from it. Yeah, it's forbidden to do, right? But it's well known. It is well known that if they do that. In other words, produce leaves from Israel that needs to be tithed, and it's not. So now the question is, what do you do? Person in Europe, America, South America, doesn't really matter, South Africa, wherever, and they're Jaffa oranges, right? Or they're dates that come from Israel. What do you do? Right? Practically speaking, what do you do? So one thing is, now there are a few things there. One is the person would have to determine is an orla. Orla means that you're not allowed to eat fruit of the tree for the first 3 years after it's planted, right? That's called orla, right? We'll see what happens in the 4th year. So outside of Israel, it's only forbidden to eat fruit that we're certain, is orla. I.e., so you could buy fruit at the grocery store without worrying, right? In other words, wherever you live, you live in America, you live in Europe, whatever, you could buy fruit not worrying that it's orla or not. That you don't have to be concerned about. But if you have fruit from the land of Israel, now, even if there's something possibly problem, let's say with orla, it's forbidden to be eaten, right? In other words, taking trumah maaser won't help. You're not allowed to eat it either way, right? But that's only going to apply to fruits. Not going to apply to vegetables. Also, some things don't have any issue, right? Oranges, let's say, don't have an issue. Tangerines may not have an issue, right? But others do. Maybe, let's say, grapes, plums, other things, right? But you have to know. You have to know how things are grown, what the market is, etc. You get another issue. By the way, it's a sabbatical year fruit, right? This year is not sabbatical year fruit, right? In other words, you have to leave the land fallow, right? So that, for sure, they're not allowed to sell outside of Israel. Not allowed to do business with it. So question how you do it in Israel, but that's not really the question here. Question is trumah maaser. Right? So now, Israeli produce, we can assume, if it's in Europe, trumah maaser hasn't been taken. Right? You have to assume it has not been done. The chief rabbinate is supposed to do it beforehand. Okay. But it's well known it's not done. Right? So now what do you do? Right? So in these times, or back in the day, where was trumah maaser given to? It was given to Kohanim, right? Levites. It's given to the poor. Could have been eaten by the owner, again, depending on the tithe itself. Nowadays, you have to separate the tithe before consuming it. That's still in effect. If you give it to, it's a different issue, right? So there are a few things here, right? There are a few things here just to understand. First of all, one thing is you have to deal with trumah gadol. What's trumah gadol called? So, the time of the temple, that separation is really called the big trumah. That separation is given to a Kohen, right? Now everyone's impure, right? So the Kohen may not consume it. Therefore, you only give a small amount, right? You only give a small amount. You would only give a small amount as trumah. Then you have maaser rishon. Maaser means a tenth. Literally means a tenth. Tenth of the remaining produce is designated as maaser rishon, what we call the first tithe. And during the time of the temple, this was given to a Levite, but could then be consumed by anyone. Today, you still need to verbally designate it as maaser, and if a person designates it as maaser, then anyone could eat it. Then you have trumah's maaser, which is a tenth of maaser rishon, which is what we call 1%. 1% of the total produce. You separate as trumah's maaser, same status as trumah gedolah, and it belongs to a Kohen. Then I have maaser sheni or maaser ani, as it's known. 10% of the remaining produce, which is 9% of the total produce altogether, right, is designated depending on the year, right? Either as maaser sheni would be the second year, or maaser ani. Maaser sheni is actually the first, second, fourth, and fifth year of the Shemitah cycle, a sabbatical year, and maaser ani separating the third and sixth year, right? Just for that. Then you have that's maaser sheni. Had to be eaten also in Jerusalem or redeemed with money, which today could be purchased food, which would be consumed in Jerusalem. Now it's redeemed. You would do it on a coin. You redeem it on a coin worth at least a pruta, which is very minimal amount, probably a couple cents, right? Which we're going to see. And then maaser ani is a poor man's tithe, right? That's what it literally means, tenth for a poor person. It was given to the poor, but can be consumed by anyone, right? Even though we need to verbally designate it today, anyone can eat it. And then you have neta Rabbi. Neta Rabbi means its connection to the laws of Orla. So we said above, it refers to the fruit of the tree of the fourth year. Neta Rabbi, something that's planted by the fourth year, right? So it's talking about fruit of a tree's fourth year. They can be eaten only in Jerusalem. Today it's redeemed, right? And you can consume it just like maaser sheni. So those are some of the terms just to be familiar with. And practically speaking, okay, so for trumah maaser, you have to ascertain what the wholesale value of the produce is, right? First of all, right, that's one thing you have to do, is to ascertain the amount, right, what it's worth. A coin cannot initially be designated for that, unless it's a value more than a pruta. A pruta kind of fluctuates. It's worth in silver with a weight of half a barley, i.e., about a quarter of a gram, right? Or like a quarter of silver at the time. I don't know, probably a number of years ago. That was probably what it was worth. So it's worth, anyway, practically speaking, it's worth about 2 to 3 cents, right? It could be 2 to 3 cents. It could be as much as 5 cents or a dime, right? An American nickel or a what do you call it? Or a dime. So what do you do? So first thing is you have to ascertain the wholesale value of the produce. So a coin cannot initially be used for maaser sheni unless a pruta, or some say even 4 prutas worth of holiness redeemed on the coin. Right? Again, the coin has to be worth something also. It can't be just like a penny. It's not going to be enough. Right? Now the question is going to be, what would happen if the total produce is less than 44 times the worth of the pruta, right? According to the stringent opinion. So practically the value fluctuates, right? So here we're going to say if the total value is close to $1 or less, let's say, right? Or what's the number here? Or it's like, let's say 2 cents, right? Or more stringent opinion is almost $1, right? It's a little bit less than an American dollar. Yeah. So it can fluctuate. So now what do you do? In either case, whatever it is, what do? You take the produce of the same species. Let's say in this case, dates. So you take all the dates, right? And you place it in front of you, right? Again, each thing, if it's dates, you put all the dates in front of you. Yeah, if it's oranges, you put them all in front of you, right? You do not mingle them. They all have to be separate. Now, what you do is you take, let's say you take a cloth that's wet with water, let's say, doesn't be soaking wet, but has to be wet, and then you touch the fruit, Why do you touch the fruit with it or whatever? Because it becomes ritually impure, making it permissible to discard the trumah and maaser later. In other words, what do you do? What you do is you dampen it. So now it's ritually impure. Now, once it becomes ritually impure, then once you take off a certain amount, which we're going to see, once you take off a certain amount, you can throw it away. 100% you can throw it away, but you have to make it ritually impure first. Now, so then, you separate, let's say, well, before I get to that, 1 second. Yeah, in a case where, let's say, you're 100% sure no ties were separated, right? Then you would make the blessing of the lahafrish trumas and maasers. That if you knew for sure that there are 100% there's no ties. Yeah, if you don't know for sure, you don't make that blessing. We'll see what to do. So then what do? So you take, let's say you take the case here was dates. So you separate a little more than 1% total produce, right? In other words, let's say, I don't know, you have 300 grams of dates. So you figure it out. If I have 25 dates, I divide 25 into 350, gets you about, 10 grams, right? Each one, let's say 10 grams or something like that. So you take 1% of that total produce, right? So in other words, if I have 350 grams worth of dates, let's say, I take 1%, which about, 1% of that is 3, right? Let's say 3.5. So let's say a date is 1 gram. So you take part of that. You take part of the date, right? Which is going to be for both trumah gadol and trumas maaser. So you separate 1%. At the same time, you have to have a coin that is worth at least a pruta from maaser sheni, right? You have to separate a coin for that. A dime, right? An American dime would be worth that value, right? Most likely. The coin has to be used as currency, obviously, where you are. So, you take, it's only worth, let's say, 5 to 10 cents. So 5 to 10 cents according to the currency where you live, right? There's a shorter version you can recite, then that is what you do. So essentially, that would be the shorter way to do it. A longer way to do it is probably doing it is you take a portion of the northernmost side, which again is a little more than 1%. That would be trumah gadola. The remaining part of the separated portion, what do? You have 1%. So you have 1% you took, plus an additional 9%, right, of the total amount that you took on the remaining produce. That's 10% altogether. Should be designated as maaser rishon, right? It's the first maaser, so that would be 10%. So again, in that case, 10% of, let's say, 350 grams, right, is 35. So you take 35 grams worth of dates over here. And that separated portion, again, is 1% of all the food. So again, it's much smaller. That 1%, right, should now be trumas maaser. So again, I have 9%, which is maaser rishon. 1% that you took originally is trumas maaser, right? So that's 10% altogether. Now, it depends on the year. If you would have to take maaser sheni, then you take 10% of the remaining produce, which is on the, I guess, southernmost side. That would become maaser sheni. If it's necessary to separate it, let's say the maaser ani during certain years, then you let 10% of the remaining produce be for maaser ani and for maaser sheni. So basically, you're going to take that 10% and it should be redeemed, right, on the value of the coin, plus an additional 25%. Why? Because you redeem maaser. If it's maaser sheni, then you redeem it on your own coin, right? You have to add 25%, which is a chomish. It's called like a fifth. you have to add 25, another 25%. Right? So basically you take 10%, then you take that as well. If it's maaser sheni, again, there's certain years, or the years for maaser sheni, third year and sixth year of the cycle, or the Shemitah cycle. So that you have to know, right? Right? That you have to know. That you have to know what year it is. So then what do I do with the separated portion? Separated portion is double wrapped. You double wrap, you throw it away, right? Because you can't do anything with it, so you throw it away. The coin itself should be defaced. Now, interesting enough, and you dispose of it, you throw it in the lake, a river, or something, so no one actually will find it. Right? Now, the issue is interesting. If you deface a coin, any coin in any currency, right? If it's done, let's say, I don't know, for fraudulent reasons or whatever, right? Then it's illegal. You're not allowed to do that, right? In our case, why is it being done? To make sure the coin isn't used by anyone else. So that should not be that shouldn't be a problem. Now, the issue over here is as well is that let's say the coin is more value than that. Right? In other words, whatever you're taking doesn't add up to the value of the coins. Technically, you could use the same coin multiple times. Right? Yeah, you'd have to figure it out. First of all, you have to separate the coin. And you have to know, you have to keep track, you should write this down, that when you do take maaser, how much you took. Because then, if the value of the coin is used up, you can't use that coin anymore. So that coin, right, really, that coin, until it's used up, you could use it multiple times, right? And the only time you're going to deface it or throw it into a lake or a river or a sewer or something like that, or before the last day of the Passover, or the fourth and seventh year of the sabbatical year, of the Shemitah cycle. That's the only time you would do it. But if you don't remember or you don't plan on reusing the same coin, then you do it straight away. Right? So that is a short version. Right. Short version. Someone asked what year, good question. What year is I think it was the fourth year or fifth year. So the last time was in September 2021. So we're in the fifth year. Right? So we're in the fifth year. We're in the fifth year. Yeah. I thought it was 6 years, fifth year. Right? Fifth year. It's the fifth year. So you got so basically you have as we said before, first, second, fourth, and fifth year is maaser sheni, right? Next year would be maaser ani, right? So that's practically speaking how it would come out. Someone asked, "Well, trumah get over the coin, the maaser levi go the same coin?" Yes, but again, you got to keep track. You got to keep track of how much you used, right? So you can use them multiple times. That's not a problem. But yeah, you have to keep track of how much you used, because essentially what a person may do is you may not have enough of the coin to do it. I think what a lot of people do is either they do that, they use one coin for multiple things, which you certainly could do. Or what they do is they'll use a smaller coin and just get rid of the smaller coin straight away, so you don't have any issues. Right? So, let's say a person forgot, you don't know how much you used it for. Right? So some people they'll have a list. They'll have a list of how much they used it for. Right? And they'll be meticulous how much they used it for, and then they'll send it. And then once they know they're getting close to using the whole thing, so what they'll do is they'll get rid of it. They'll get rid of the coin and then they'll use a different coin. What do you do with the part that we're supposed to eat in Jerusalem? So once it's redeemed, once you I don't think that's it. I don't I'm talking about maaser sheni. 1 second. 1 second. Yeah, you can redeem it. You redeem it on a coin, right? You redeem it on a coin, which means purchased food that be consumed in Jerusalem. So again, you redeem it on a coin, you can eat it. You can eat it anywhere, right? Even maaser sheni, you can eat anywhere, right? If you wanted to, you give that produce to someone in Israel, but you're probably not going to do that. So seemingly, you should be able to redeem it. You should be able to eat it. It doesn't matter where you eat it, even though it really should be done in Jerusalem. It doesn't matter. Today it's not going to apply. That would be the answer. That would be the answer for that. Okay. Somebody asked, I want to get to this also. I don't know how to read Hebrew. I can recognize the letters, but I cannot read it. What were the best translation of scriptures to read? They would be, I would say, to get Art Scroll. Art Scroll, any Art Scroll Chumash, let's say, right? Or Art Scroll Prayer Book will have a good translation. I would not recommend people getting transliteration, because once you learn how to read Hebrew properly, then you realize you made a lot of mistakes and you have to relearn everything and relearn how to say everything. So better to break your teeth on learning Hebrew than using transliteration, even though in the short run, transliteration is not a bad thing, right? It'll help you pronounce the prayers, but you don't necessarily know if you're pronouncing them right or not. And then once you learn how to read Hebrew, it may take you might have to relearn everything anyway. So any Art Scroll translation is good, right? For a prayer book, for a chumash, right? Any of them are going to be anything's going to be good. Some instructors, someone says, make so much with their heresy and idolatry. Looks like gender and Torah. Yeah. The problem is their people talk a good game. Problem is people talk a good game, right? And they can say things that the person missed. Yeah, or they didn't see anything. They didn't necessarily see anything wrong with it. It's a big problem, not a small problem. You can have someone who has thousands of followers, and they say that a gay person is never going to get punished. That's a problem, right? So I know the Orthodox are going to be upset with me saying this. Yeah, because it's heresy, right? They say, what do you do with someone they knew of, 3 years old, this boy was playing with the doll. So like you're surprised this person, ends up being gay. It's not his fault. So whose fault is it? Like really, whose fault is it? They make a choice. Everybody makes a choice. Could they have more of a tendency towards it? Yes. Could a person have more tendency to be an adulterer? Yes. Goes both ways. Yeah, let's say. They're not going to be guilty? What do you want? He was a philanderer, it's in his genes. So you're going to say the same thing about a gay person, it's in his genes. Okay, but who said you're supposed to act on it? Yeah, so this heretic says, yeah, I know the other Orthodox are going to be upset at me. Of course, you idiot, because that's heresy. Like, what do you expect this kid was going to be growing up? He's got free choice. I know of somebody, I don't know him personally, but, somebody was like more feminine, let's say, growing up. Did things, more girlish, let's say. The way they ran, the way they did other things. Yeah, and whatever the kid was probably made fun of. I made fun of a lot, I would assume. I'm not saying it's right. But at the end of the day, like, this person ended up, becoming gay. Now you say, wow, look what he went through and look at this. And okay, but he had a choice. He absolutely had a choice. Yeah. Or I know of someone else, don't know them, that well, that, a woman was dating, and I don't know, if he got abused. I don't know exactly the story, what happened, and decided to become a guy because of it. So to grow up Orthodox. Yeah. So you say, well, based on that bad experience or bad experiences that they had, is what they chose to do. But everyone's got free choice. Yeah. Okay, they had a bad experience. I can understand that. That doesn't give you the right to change body parts. That doesn't give you the right to go one way or the other. In that sense. Yeah, so they're going to be judged. Oh, again, I'm not justifying what they did, right? Right? I'm not saying I don't have empathy for what they went through. Yeah. Yeah, I can have total empathy what they went through. It doesn't give them the right to do what they did. And it doesn't mean the Torah's not going to hold them accountable. Right? This quote unquote rabbi says they won't be held accountable. Well, like, what do you expect? Right? This kid was playing with dolls, so, when he was 3. What do you think this kid was going to become? That's not an answer. That's not even a third and long. It's not even a punt. It's idiocy. Yeah. Why do I say it's idiocy? The kid has free choice. Later on, he's got free choice. Does he have more of a tendency? Could have. Some people have more tendency to be, adulterers. People have more tendency to want to money launder. People could have more tendency to do all kinds of things. Yeah. So what? Doesn't mean God wants you to act on it. Right? Like, so this idiot says, the Orthodox going to be, they're gonna call me a heretic for saying this. Yeah, you're damn right. You don't go saying that. Right? It's tragic. I understand, the person, what I can feel for what they went through, or what they're going through. Makes sense. But God doesn't give you the right to act on it. Right? Well, God's not going to punish them? It's part of his nature. Okay. Don't we have many things that are part of our nature that are bad? Even if we did it to ourselves, not as our DNA that our parents gave us? Let's say we did it to ourselves. Very good. That DNA, that part of your DNA stinks to high heaven. Okay. God says you shouldn't act on it, but it's part of me. What do you want from me? That's who I am. Okay, so you have more of a challenge in this area. Other people have challenge in other areas. Okay. They give you the right to, God's not going to punish you for that. Let's say, part of his DNA, his parents, had serious anger issues. So this child grows up also has serious anger issues, right? Let's say, it's not his fault. His parents gave it to him. Okay, I agree. They weren't from osmosis. Okay, they're not going to be punished. They're not going to be punished for bursting out and ripping things up and doing other things while they're angry. Well, you can't blame them. That's how they grew up. Okay, they have more of a bias. I get it. They have much more of a bias to that or to other things. Okay. That doesn't mean they're not guilty for doing it. Everyone has their biases, whatever they are. Everybody has them, whether they did it to themselves or it's in their DNA from their parents. For better or for worse. That's the way it is. Okay. God says, well, you got it from your parents. Too bad, sucker. It's your fault. You have bad genes. Yeah? And God's going to say, yeah, you got bad genes. I'm still going to punish you. Yeah, so what if you have bad genes? If you have bad genes, there are things you can overcome. It's not going to be easy. Somebody got serious anger issues, got it from their parents, and they burst out later. And they do all kinds of things when they're angry. God says, I understand you're angry. Very good. I understand you got it from your parents. Very good. I didn't want you to act this way. You're not going to be guilty? Who says you're not going to be guilty? Guilty is charged. And this kid, God forbid, becomes a homosexual. Oh, it's not his fault. Whose fault is it? It's part of his genes. Okay, never been proven. And it will never be proven, even if it would be proven. Doctor once told me many years ago, yeah, they've isolated a gene. Okay. What about an anger gene? They ever isolate the anger gene? What about the I don't want to help others gene? What about I don't want to get up and pray gene? Got a lot of bad genes. Yeah? So God says, okay, you got the bad gene, however you got it. I don't want you to act on it. I don't want you to do it. So you have a certain disposition. Good. That's your disposition to work on. Okay? That's our disposition. You're not guilty if you act on it? What do you expect? Idiot, what do you mean, what do you expect? I feel bad. This person turned into a homosexual. I feel really bad. Yeah? Who says you're not guilty? He's got free choice. No one's putting a gun to his head and told him to do it. He's guilty. It's sad and it's tragic, and most people, who are gay or trans or whatever you want to call them, they wish they weren't. The vast majority wish they weren't, but they are. And they have these tendencies. Okay, isn't that sad? Yes. It's sad. Some end up committing suicide. They don't fit in. They have other issues, right? Mostly psychological. Not me talking. This is what psychologists say. Yeah, whether you hold by them or not. Psychological. Okay. Right? Other things could happen. I'm not saying not. Yeah, not just in the mind. Could be other things also. Okay. Are they guilty? Heavenly court, guilty or not guilty? Well, it depends. What do you mean it depends? They're guilty. You can't say, oh, I know the other Orthodox are going to be mad at me. Yeah, of course we're going to be mad at you. That's heresy. We don't care how the kid grew up. It's sad. It's tragic. Very good. Are they guilty or not? They're guilty. But whatever they do, they're guilty, let's say. Not under onus, whatever. They did to themselves. But they have a certain disposition. Don't we all have bad dispositions? We all have bad dispositions. Whatever they may be, we won't bring out anyone's dirty laundry. Yeah, everyone's got certain dispositions. Whether they did it themselves or the parents gave it to them. Okay. You want to tell me that's onus? It's not onus. Right? I'll give an example. Even by non-Jews, this applies. Right? I'll give one example. Mike Tyson back in the day. He went to jail. Why did he go to jail? For rape. Yeah? He raped a woman. Yeah? So what was his line of defense? Can't believe Dershowitz put him on the stand. What was his line of defense? His line of defense was, she was in my room at 3 a.m, my hotel room. And everyone knows I'm an animal. That's your line of defense? Guilty! Right? They fried him. He's in jail for a number of years. Just because he's an animal, quote unquote. Let's say it's true. And he's got all these bad tendencies. Okay. Now that gives him a right to do whatever he wants. She knew what she was doing up there. Yeah, but she said no. She said no. She said no. She said no. Right? We'll keep this clean. So he's guilty. No matter what's in his genes. Nobody cares what's in his genes. Yeah, everyone knows I'm an animal. So she should have expected that. Well, she didn't. And she wasn't interested in that. So he's guilty. Right? Doesn't matter what happened inside of him. Doesn't matter who he claims to be. Everyone knows I'm an animal. Thank you very much. Guilty. Doesn't give you a right to act on it. If someone says no, does not give you the right. Right? So the court of law, what they do, they convicted him. He's not a victim of circumstance. He's guilty. Yeah? It's the same thing. It's the same thing. Nothing to what you act on, you act on it. You're not guilty? What do you mean not guilty? Total onus. Really? Someone put a gun to this person's head and says, do this. Right? So the immorality, you have to die for that. For a Jew, if you're a Jew. Do this or die. Okay. Anyone put a gun to their head? No. They're doing it willingly. Oh, but it's in their genes. Well, I care about their genes. They all have plenty of other bad genes. So what? They're not guilty? Yeah, that's heresy. That 100% is heresy. I don't care if he's got million followers, billion followers. Oh, you don't have as many followers, you're jealous. That's not even being jealous. Yeah. Rabbi always says if you have one person that listens, also good. Not about numbers. Yeah, but this is heresy. This is absolute heresy. Yeah, oh, it's the way he grew up. Who cares? It's tragic. It's sad. The bottom line, right? Is he guilty? He's guilty. 100% he's guilty. Right? Got to take responsibility for your actions. Oh, he grew up that way. This happened, that. So what? Most people that are pedophiles were acted on, tragically. Other pedophile, attacked them. That's usually the case, according to the people in the know that deal with pedophiles. Yeah? Keep this clean also. Yes, it's not their fault. Because when they were kids, someone did it to them. Okay. It's a major trauma. Okay. Now, does that give that person who was acted upon the permissibility to be a pedophile? Is anyone in the court of law going to care about that? No. They're not going to care. They may have sympathy a little bit, but they're not going to care. The person's guilty. Doesn't matter if they were acted upon, which is most likely the case. They were raped as a child. Okay, it's terrible. It's totally traumatic. And if they act on someone else later, the court's going to say, oh, because of this happened, they're not guilty. Really? They're going to jail. It doesn't matter. They're going to jail. Jail's not going to help them. I mean, seemingly nothing. I don't even think there's any proper treatment for these people. It can stop them. I mean, there's one thing you can, you can make it possible where they can't do it anymore, right? That'll take it down a notch. I mean, they don't get rehabilitated usually. Yeah, but that's the same case. Same exact case. Just because it happened to them gives them a right later to do it to someone else. Because they, grew up in a broken home. This is what happened, and they, people press charges. You think the person's not going to be guilty? Of course they're going to be guilty. Doesn't matter the circumstance of what happened to them as a kid. So what? So they went through a trauma, right? Isn't that against the law? Oh yeah, it's against the law. Yeah, plenty of pedophiles out there. Every neighborhood has pedophiles. Every neighborhood. There's a list. You can get the list online. Right? Who are pedophiles where near you live? They're not guilty? Are they not guilty? Right? That goes against, a lot of things that goes against in Torah. One of them is you got to take responsibility for your actions unless it's onus. Even if it's onus, certain things you're going to be guilty for also. This is not onus. You got free choice. If someone was acted upon and it's tremendous trauma, could they do it to others? Yes. Is it right? No one's going to say it's right. No one in the right mind is going to say it's right. Right? It's sad, 100%. This is what it could lead to. Okay. But bottom line, are they guilty or not guilty? They're guilty. You can't tell me, well, it's not their fault. Whose fault is it? You say the person acted upon them. Okay. But you're not going to blame them, right? The parent takes this guy to court. Yeah, he's going to say, it's not my fault. You know why? Because Johnny, 25 years ago, did it to me. Yeah, and now, whatever. It's not my fault. I'm a victim of circumstance. Not my fault. Blame Johnny. Johnny ain't coming to court. Even if Johnny admits what he did, doesn't matter. He ain't coming to court. He ain't bailing you out. You know why he's not bailing you out? Because you got to take responsibility for your actions. Doesn't matter what happened to you as a kid. You're guilty. Parents not going to care what Johnny did. Johnny, Dirk, Tim, whoever, right? Whoever did it. Doesn't matter. Totally doesn't matter. He ain't coming to the courtroom. He's got no place there. They're going to say, you, Butch, whoever did it. You're guilty. Blame it on someone else. Good luck. Right? It's Christianity. It's called pass the buck. But you can't blame them. Again, we're not saying it's not sad. We're not saying it's not tragic. Yeah? It still doesn't give you the right to do it later because Johnny did it to you. Where's the logic in that? They say because it's part of your genes. Yeah? That has nothing to do with Torah. That is totally outside of Torah. Yeah? Because even if it is part of your nature, even if you were, even if a person got messed up from it, okay, now it's part of your nature. Seriously? God wants you to act on it? He wants you to do it? You're not going to be guilty. Maybe take away some of the punishment. I don't know, because certain things you went through. Okay. But you're guilty. It's charged. I mean, it's a harsh thing to say, but that's the reality. There's no gene that you get away with saying, see, I got this bad, I got this anger gene. God's going to overlook it because I got this, this is the way I was born. He's not overlooking that. He doesn't want you to act on it. You have a certain disposition that's harder to fight against. Very good. It's much harder to fight against. Okay. Everybody has those bad genes. We all have them. You know what? And it doesn't matter where you got it from. Whether you did it to yourself, you were born that way. These are things we have to live with and we have to try and overcome. Very good. Who says you're not going to be guilty? How in the world you're not be guilty? Makes a person feel good, I think. I think it makes them feel very good. Then you're not responsibility for your actions. Yeah. Who does the trumah go to? Back to trumah. Yeah, what did we say before? Trumah, throw away. You don't have to give it to anybody. You can throw it away. If it's a year, let's say, if it's something that would go to a Levi, so if you know a Levi, give it to them. You can give it to a Levi, right? In those years you gave it to a Levi. You could give it to a Kohen, you don't have to. True, we can throw away. 100% you can throw it away. When there was Beis Hamikdash Kohanim and they ate it, yeah. However, nowadays you can't eat it, right? So you discard it, right? So, however, use trumah from olive oil to light Shabbos candles. That'd be an issue. That would be an issue. Yeah. Let me just double check something. 1 second. I don't think you should be allowed to. You gotta burn it. Yeah. That would be pretty for Kohanim, right? You could use it for the mitzvah. Yeah. A Kohen could do that. Kohen could do that. But you gotta make it ritually impure. Right. That's the way you use it though. Right? That's the way you would do it. You would burn it. Right. So using it for let's say for Shabbos candles, you're burning it, right? So even though you're getting Onik Shabbos, you're getting enjoyment from the light, that doesn't matter. It's okay. Right? You should be able to do it. Right? Right. So you are allowed to do it. That's different though, because that's the way it's used. Right? But you're doing it in a way that you burn it. Right? So that'd be all right. That should be allowed to do. Right. They can use trumah for Shabbos candles. That's true. Right? Can they use trumah to purchase oil for lamps? Only for lamps. If they're going to use it for the oil, yeah. Yeah. But it has to be something that they're using it to be burnt. So using it for a mitzvah is better. Right? Yeah, let's say burning because you want to use it for a fire because it's cold. Right? It's cold in Florida now. Yeah, so could you use it for that to burn for a fire? Probably. Yeah, it's probably better to use it for a mitzvah, but you can probably use it for that also. They're a collection point or one hunt down their own coin. You find your own coin. I remember I had a tree that actually bore some fruit, and it was the year to give to whatever I gave it to a Levi. Right? I gave some of it to some of it I took off, I gave to a Levi. Yeah, so yeah, you give it to anybody. Anyone who's a Kohen or a Levi. Right? As long as they're a legitimate Kohen or Levi, they didn't blow it. In other words, if you know someone who's a Kohen, but they're intermarried, let's say, you can't give it to them. Right? But whatever, a bona fide Kohen that doesn't have any issues, you could give it to. Right? Or Levi, yeah, you can find someone. It doesn't have to be someone specific. You can give it to anyone you want. Right? But it has to be, let's say, a Kohen or a Levi. Yeah. Any other questions? One thing, just to keep in mind, on this, tirade, as we said before, you got to be careful, who you listen to. But again, anyone's going to tell you, that, like that's an onus and they're not guilty is rubbish, right? It's absolute rubbish, right? And that's why, because the Orthodox will be upset against me because it's rubbish. Right? If somebody makes it, let's say like this, even the person's a big rabbinic scholar, let's say, they make a statement like that, you throw them in the garbage. You think whatever they wrote, you burn it. I mean, it's not worth anything. I'm not just saying they made a mistake. There are people that can make mistakes, they'll retract, right? Let's say something they said because it wasn't true, or others disagreed, or whatever it may be. Okay. That's okay. But if someone's going to, stand strong, and say that's my opinion, whatever, and it goes diametrically opposed to what the Torah says, then whatever else they say, I don't care. They can be the biggest rabbinic scholar in the world. They can know 10 times more than I'll ever know in 10 lifetimes. That's great. Yeah, the Torah's not worth anything. Not worth anything. Yeah, you throw them under the bus. It's a mitzvah to throw them under the bus because they're misleading people. And there are a lot of people out there, unfortunately. Get tens of thousands of views, and they're misleading people. 100% misleading people. Right there, the part we're supposed to eat in Jerusalem. Again, you get rid of it. You can't bring it. You can't give it in Jerusalem. Yeah. So you get rid of it. You get rid of it. Yeah. Any other questions? That's for maaser sheni. Yeah, I think maaser sheni like the same thing. You get rid of, right? You can't give it to anyone, right? You're not gonna be able to give it to anyone. In general, yeah, that's the problem. Um, yeah, normally you would redeem it with money, which could be used to purchase food consumed in Jerusalem. So here, what do? You redeem it on a coin, right? Where it takes place, right? And you get rid of it. Just like any maaser or any trumah, you get rid of it. Nothing to do with it, right? Nothing to do with it. Yeah. Any other questions? All right, I'm gonna stop here. I do this every Tuesday and Thursday, 10 o'clock Eastern time, 5 o'clock Eastern time. Anyone has any questions, feel free. Shoot me an email, or if you want to set up a time to speak, you can find me on Facebook at Michael Kaufman, Beyond Orthodox Conversion Judaism, OrthodoxConversion.com. Beyond Orthodox Conversion Judaism on YouTube. There I get videos, Q&As, Ethics of Our Fathers, Book of Leviticus. You want to send me an email? Again, Rabbi Chaim Kaufman at gmail.com, RBBI, CHIM, COFFMAN at gmail.com, whichever good. Beginning of the day, middle of the day.